2013 Peugeot 508 2-litre HDI, timing belt and water pump, and God knows what else. And these are a bit of a nightmare because the way they've got the engine tilted back, and there's hardly any room, and it's a bit awkward to do the old tensioner. But yeah, apart from that, oh yeah, and there's a very stupid bolt on the bottom of these, same as the Fords. 21, 22 mil, can't remember off the top of my head. And it's got a lot of Loctite on it. So the only way to take it off safely is to get a heat gun and actually heat it up. But I'll go through that with you once we get cracking. Hello and welcome to another Bodgit and Leggit video. Yes, so timing belt. I'm going to do a few things first off camera just because it's easier and you're not going to be able to see what I'm doing anyway. So first thing is we're going to disconnect the battery. We're going to take off the boost pipe and mostly take off the intake pipe because we need to get to the starter motor. We need to take the starter motor out so we can lock the bottom pulley or lock the I can't even think of the word, flywheel, that's the word, and mark it. It's just easier. You don't actually have to take it off, but it's just easier. It's only 3 bolts and a couple of wires and it's off. You might also find you have a big expansion bottle that kind of needs to be taken out. This one's only a little one, so we don't need to take that out. Also, just again for handiness sake, I'm going to remove these diesel pipes and put them to the side just because, you know, they're kind of in the way. So let me kind of do all that off camera and then I will show you what we need to do. Right, so what I've done is I've taken out the airbox, I've disconnected the battery. These are handy, there's a little clip that lifts up and the whole battery disconnects. There's no bolts or anything on it. I've taken off the cold intake as well. You see they're there and there. That gives us loads of room to get the starter motor off. We need to get an Allen key in there. There's 3 bolts, 1, 2 and 3. That will take the starter motor off, and then that will allow us to mark the flywheel but also lock it. You see we've got loads of room. 2 Juby clips to take off the intake, and then just, what was it, 1 clip and just a push and fit in for the cold intake, and then the airbox just pops out. Disconnect the map sensor and then you're good to go. Very, very simple. Again, I'm going to take off the starter motor off camera because you're not going to be able to see me do it. To be honest, you're going to hardly see anything on this, but I will go through it as much as I can, and I'll try and maybe get some pictures on the screen so you can see the timing belt marks and you can see exactly what I'm doing. Right, so I've got the bottom tray off, I've got the wheel off, and I've got the inner arch cover off so we can see the bottom pulley. So next thing I'm going to do, again I'm going to have to do it off camera because you're not going to be able to see anything. I'm going to take the fuel lines off and out of the way just because it gives you that little bit more room. Very simple. You press down the white button and this comes out. This one you take out the green one, I believe, and then you press in the orange one, or vice versa. I haven't really looked at it properly, but it's kind of like that. That means then I can put them out the way. Then I'm just going to undo, I think it's 3 or 4 10 mils for the top cover. Then I can actually turn the engine and I can show you the actual lock-in procedure before we take everything else off. So I've moved the fuel lines. I can't get to all the bolts on the case because they decided to put the engine at a really weird tilt, slant, whatever, which is just stupid. So I'm going to have to take off the engine mount. So I'm going to take the stabilizing bar out first, then I'm going to take the engine mount out. But obviously before we do that, we need to support the engine with a jack. But don't just put the jack on the sump because you can damage it. So put something, a piece of wood across it or something, just to spread the load, and it's just a lot easier. And what I always tend to do is jack it up just until you can see the engine mount move slightly, because then when you undo the bolts aren't under tension and pressure. Because if you just have it resting there, the last bolt you're going to come onto, the engine's going to want to drop and you're going to destroy the threads inside the engine mount, which is never a good thing. So once I get all them off, I will tell you what everything was, and then we can hopefully kind of see where we're going. Then we can take the fan belt off, and then, you know, we can then get the bottom pulley off. Well, we'll time it up first, but get the bottom pulley off. But I have a trick and easier to get the bottom pulley off. And yeah. Right, the dog can see the rabbit. So we've taken off the engine mount, and you can see, we can kind of see a lot more. But look, not even, or just over a finger space in there, where it's really, really tight. Where if they had the engine straight, oh, it'd be so much easier. Anyway, so we have T50s and then 3 T40s to take off the actual mount from the car itself. But one thing I did find on the stabilizing bar, 2 16mm bolts, but look at that, completely and utterly gone, destroyed. Yeah. Oh, I just dropped that. Oh, I didn't look. See, it doesn't even have enough room for the head of the bloody bolt to go through. Right, I'm going to take these covers off. Don't be tempted to undo this bolt just for shits and giggles, because this bolt is what holds one of the idlers on. So if you see that bolt just hanging out and you think, well, I wonder what it does, let me take it off. I know no one's ever going to do that, but, but I'm just telling you. Got the 2 bolts at the top, one here and one here, 2 10mm, and then we've got just under here, I've dropped the engine down now, so the engine is slightly lowered on the jack, and you can just see here we have a 10mm nut. Now this 10mm nut actually holds both covers on, so it holds the top cover, but it also holds a bit of the bottom cover as well as other bolts. We need to get that off. Then what we can actually do is we can turn the crank and we can line up the timing properly, and then we can take everything else off. Right, we've got the cover off, and it's always good to keep all the bolts with the bit you're taking off. It's just easier. You can just put, you know, the nuts or the bolts back in the holes where they kind of come from, or rest them inside here, for example. So it's 3 or two bolts, 1 nut to take that off. They're all 10mm, and then the wiring is connected to the side, which is just a nightmare because there's just no room to get the bloody thing off. I ended up taking this off, which was a 10mm here, just so I could get the stabilizing bolt out. And now you can see we have a hole in the top crank, which is one of our lining marks. So in other words, you have to turn that, I think it's roughly to about here, but I'll do that in a second. Put an 8mm pin in that. Anything that's essentially 8mm, doesn't matter if it's an old drill bit, bolt, doesn't really matter. There is special locking pins for this, but anything that is essentially 8mm. Then right the way down here, you can just see the hole here inside the engine, basically at the top of the starter motor. We also need to put an 8mm pin in that, so that locks the flywheel, which essentially locks the bottom crank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line all that up. I will show you then. I also mark it. Someone's obviously always been here before, because obviously this is 2013, so it's been changed at least once. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark it as well as put the pins in, just in case, because it's easier to see the Tipex marks than it is necessarily if the pin has slipped, because the pin won't really look like it's moved, but it could have slipped inside the little recess it goes into. So I always just like to mark everything with Tipex, and I prefer to use 2 marks just because, again, it's easier to see when you have 2 marks if they've moved slightly more so than 1 mark. Let me get all that timed up, then we can take off the fan belt. Well, we can take off the fan belt now, to be honest. 15 or 16mm, I can't remember off the top of my head. Release the tensioner, fan belt comes off. Once we got it timed up, we can then, I can show you the little trick on the bottom pulley, and we can take that off. Right, I said I'll show you this before I completely time it. So you can see the hole that's essentially in the head, which will line up with the hole that's in the pulley. So I just need to keep turning it till that hole lines up. And essentially exactly the same thing in the flywheel. Now you're not going to really be able to see it, but if you line up the top hole and there's nothing to line up in the bottom flywheel, don't worry, just turn it round again, because the flywheel or the bottom pulley will turn twice to the top turning once. So you might technically be 180 degrees off. So just turn it another full revolution and the 2 holes then should line up. So don't be afraid, but you can clearly see the hole that is in the head there. I'll just show you what I'm using. This is the proper locking pin for the bottom, but again, look, anything that's 8mm will work. And this is what I'm using for the top, because the proper locking pin is actually a bit too long. You can use it, but it sticks out a bit too much, and this 8mm bolt goes all the way in. And as you can see, if you're unsure, just get something and test it in the hole first. Don't line it up, test it in the hole, because if you line it up, you don't know if it's actually going in the hole properly, because you don't want it too loose in the hole because it can move. You can see that goes in, but look how nice and flat that is. The normal locking pin comes here and it gets in the way here, so having something nice and flat and fits in there nice is good. So once I tighten that up, I'll turn the camera back on. All right, see if I can show you. Where is it? That is the little clip or hole that our pin has to go through. You can just see it there. So that's what you're looking for. It's taken me ages to line up this bolt because this one was lining up, but the engine one or the flywheel one just was miles off. What I've had to have done for the minute is grind down the bolt, because as you can see, the camera's going to show this. Look at that. We are not lined up. What I think has happened, I don't think the timing belt is stretched. Possibility, but I doubt it. I think it's been set up wrong on the bottom. When you remove the bottom pulley, there is a keyway in the middle, and there is like a special little procedure. What you really want to do is you want to get the keyway in the middle of the pulley, but that's when it's set. But as you're actually putting it on, you essentially want to turn it, I believe if I remember correctly, all the way to the right, and as you tension it, it will pull it back to the left, and in the middle the pulley at the bottom can move slightly. I'm only talking a couple of mil, but a couple of mil is all it needs to tension properly. If you have that on the wrong side, when you come to tensioning it, it can't move. So the next thing that's going to move is either the top pulley or the flywheel, if it's not locked in properly. So I'm guessing most of the flywheel is moved, to be honest. Not a lot, but enough that I had to grind, you know, a good bit off that bolt for it to fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm obviously going to set it up differently. I've got the bottom pulley set up correctly, so the crank set up properly, and I'm slightly off on the top cam. And the reason why is it's easier for me to slightly adjust that than it would be the bottom. But I'll know as soon as I take off the bottom pulley to see if my theory is correct. But what I am going to do now is I'm going to mark everything, get everything set up, mark it the way it is with Tipp-Ex marks, with kind of wrong, I think. Then we're going to take off the bottom pulley, then we're going to see. So this could be an interesting one. This is the sort of things you might come across yourself. It's just, it's annoying, but we can get over it. Right, so I've got more information on this car. I've also marked everything with Tipp-Ex, which is good. So before we take the belt off and before we take the bottom pulley off. And the main dealer has basically looked after this car, the one that the customer actually bought it from originally. So I would be guessing that the main dealer would know the procedure. It's not like a secret procedure, it's just, you know, it's just a little thing you need to know to make your life easier, to maybe stop this from moving. So I'm presuming it's been done properly. Maybe the timing belt has stretched slightly. I don't know yet, we will soon find out. If it was more aftermarket, I would say maybe the procedure is wrong, because if they didn't know the procedure, you can still put the belt on and it can kind of be fine, because the car starts and drives perfectly. You know, I would maybe think maybe it's slightly wrong, but with it being a main dealer, I would be guessing that they would know. But again, look, I mean, main dealers get a bad rep, and so do aftermarket garages. At the end of the day, it's whoever works there is more the problem than the main dealer or the aftermarket people. Anyway, I'm now going to get this bottom pulley off. I'm going to use a heat gun. I'll show you. Heat it up before I take it off, because it just kind of melts the glue on it a lot easier. You know, the Loctite glue, and the bolt comes off a lot bloody easier. All I'm doing, I've got a heat gun. Just turn it on and just heat up the bolts. You do have to be careful, it's like anything. Yes, you can damage the pulley. Now we're replacing the pulley and a new bolt, because, you know, again, that's what it really does need, and that's what the manufacturer suggests. So you kind of have to do what they say for warranty reasons and for all sorts. So I'm just going to heat up the bolt, then zip it off with the gun, because I've got a powerful gun and we shouldn't have a problem. What I do see happening sometimes is when people don't do this because they don't realize, you can damage the threads inside the the crank. It's not too bad if you damage the bolt because you can easily replace the bolt, but the crank's a different story. So any cars with Loctite on the bottom, I just heat them up. It's just a safety thing, and it just, you know, it's just easier because it only takes a few minutes. Right, one thing I know is the main dealer didn't put a new bloody bolt on it, because there should be loads of Loctite on there, but there just isn't. Hopefully there's no thread damage. Doesn't look like it. And the genius of me, I didn't even take the bloody fan belt off. So we've got now to take the fan belt off before I take the pulley off. And be careful, because there's the pickup ring behind this, and it's a magnet pickup ring. We're replacing all that, but just be careful if you're not, because if you damage that, the car won't start. You can see new bolts. You just see how much Loctite is on there, loads. New pickup ring. It's a magnet pickup ring, so be very, very careful. And a new pulley. Oh, shit. Well, I was lucky there. That fell on the floor, but I just got my magnet paper, showing that in other videos, and there's no cuts or breaks in the magnet. Whew, lucky. Anyway. Yeah, so that's what we're replacing. Right, this is the ring I was talking about. I haven't taken it off yet, so pause the video, and honestly pause the video and put a comment down below. Do you think it was right, fitted right, or fitted incorrectly? Do you have faith in the main dealers, or don't you? Are you ready? We're gonna go together. Oh, I thought so. Absolutely, completely and utterly wrong. That's why I couldn't get the timing marks in, because it was set up wrong. That's supposed to be in the middle, and I'm going to show you how to set that up properly. It's simple, it's tricky, frustrating, but it's simple. You don't need any special tools or anything like that. But yeah, 100% this was just set up completely and utterly wrong. Right, I've now set that up properly, and look, half a tooth off. I've now got a proper pin in there, which is the right thickness, and we're half a tooth off just on the top cam alone. Interesting to know the main dealer using a Gates kit, which is not, I don't have any issues with Gates, but it's a Gates, you can just see it there, Gates timing belt. I brought timing belts off main dealers. Comes in a Peugeot or a Ford box, but I've ever seen, like, when it says Ford or Peugeot on for the original timing belt. Even, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but even when you go back to the main dealers and you get one off them, it'll come in a Ford box, but it might be a Gates or different. I've never seen like Ford or Peugeot stamped onto one you even buy from a main dealer, if that makes sense. Our bottom marks are right, but we knew that anyway, but our top marks are off. But this is the key. Now when we come down here, look how much we can move this bottom pulley. This is designed to be in the mid. It was all the way here, but it's designed to be there once everything is tensioned properly. This is designed to move as you tension the belt, just to make it easier for you to put the belt on and easier for you to tension. So basically what you want is, I'm not going to be able to film this, but I'm going to explain it here now. You want this side here, which is not the side for the tensioner. You want this side to be, as you know, tensioned quite good, and this side to be loose. So when you actually tension the tensioner properly, the loose side can take up the slack, and you want this to be more or less where it is now. And as you tension it, it will bring it back to the middle. You see that? So as this side gets tensioned, rather than trying to push the belt or move the top pulley, as in this case it did, you want it to move the bottom pulley, which is free floating, to about in the middle. It doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, but the more in the middle it is, the better. And then when you turn it twice, you know, by hand, again, you want to make sure it's in the middle. It's just, you know, it's so simple, but it's a little trick you need to know on these. Then it's awkward tensioning these things, because I'm not going to be able to get you in here. This is how you tension it. This needs to go right the way in here. You just see it there. And then as you pull the Allen key to tension it, this little arrow comes into the middle, and once it's in the middle there, you know you got the right tension. But like I said, as it's doing that, it's pulling the belt and it's slightly twisting the bottom pulley to be right. Now I need to take off this to get the idler off. It's a 16 mil, I believe. It looks like 16 mil anyway. And then we can get the idler off, which is just in here. So I'm going to do that now. The issue with this is what can happen is you won't necessarily do any damage. As you can see, there's no damage been done, even though it's slightly off. But you can get a timing problem and an engine light on, and then you know you have to go all the way back. So it's not that necessarily you'll get an issue with the engine. I mean, you can destroy the engine, but you can also get a permanent light on the dash with a timing system or a timing fault, and it's just, you know, it's just frustrating. Right, that's where it goes. 16 mil hours right. You don't have to completely like take the bolt out, just obviously undo it, and as you can see, it will slide through there. So we don't get a new bolt with it, unfortunately, but see, the bolt won't go all the way through because of the thickness of the mount. That's all it goes through, so we can slide that up, screw it in, and then we have our new idler on. I am a firm believer, if there is a gasket, use a gasket, don't use sealer. And there is a metal gasket in this one, which is good. Now sometimes they come with a paper one, and it's not that a metal one is better than a paper one. They kind of tend to be, but it's not really a guarantee. It's just a shame they don't have these little lugs to clip around here to stop it from falling off. But it's very simple, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts, and I believe this one is kind of like a bolt and a stud sticking out, because this is where the timing belt cover goes on to. So again, I'm not going to film that because I'm in a massive rush with this. It has to be out, but I've done other timing belt videos where I've done that, and it's exactly the same. We do have to bleed the system, but what I really want to get done on this in and show you the proper procedure for tightening it, which is kind of important, more so than showing you the water pump. Right, I'm not going to be able to show you this, but because I'm going to put the camera down the bottom to actually do the proper timing procedure. But you can see here, it's very important you get this in the actual lug here so it doesn't move. And when we come to tension this bar will move down. You see, you can't, there, now we go. This bar will move down and it'll go in the middle of this, which is essentially this here. So what will happen is, as you tension this, you can see the arrow, you can only go one way. So as you're tensioning this, but if you don't have it in there, this will not tension, it'll just spin round. This bar then will come, oh, my glove's in the way. That point there will come into the middle there, like that. And once that happens, you know you've got the right tension on the belt. And then what you've got to check is make sure the pulley is in the middle. It hasn't moved too much to one side. Right, this is why you don't put sealer on bolts or anything, because look, yeah, I know it's all running on the floor. I know. Anyway, look, moan at me in the comments about it. But you know, all the sealer on these bolts, especially when this thing doesn't need sealer. Look at it. Just, it's a nightmare, absolute nightmare. So I'm just going to replace the pump now. I should be catching all this, but I've got nothing to catch it with. Oh, it kind of came out of me more than I was thinking it would. Can't wait to see the comments. Yeah, I don't know what you're doing, you're not supposed to do that. Yeah, whatever. One thing I forgot to say is the sensor. Take the sensor off, the cam sensor off, or the crank sensor off, but be very careful. See this hole here, that lines up with the hole here, that aligns it. These can be seized in there and you can snap it off, so be very, very careful when you take this off. Take this off, you know, don't try and put anything behind it and lever it off. Take it off nicely, because otherwise you'll break it and you'll be in trouble. Right, look, they used the metal gasket, but look at all the sealer jumped up around it. Like, that's going to go in the water system, that's going to get blocked, that's going to mostly, you know, or possibly cause it to overheat, and just, you know, it's even a little bit in there. Look at it, see it? Why? And I've got to clean all this now. Just don't use sealer if you don't need it. If there's a gasket, use a gasket. If you need sealer, okay, fair enough, use sealer. Whoever did this is a muppet from start to finish. Like, you remember what I was saying about the little lugs that I wish was on the gasket to hold it in? I have to say, Gates, you are thinking, look at that tiny little lug, not lug, but it's kind of a bit lower, look, that little thing there. Watch this. Love this. This is awesome. It clips in, so when you put it on, it actually, I'll try and do this one-handed now. This was awesome, but now I've just made it look like an absolute mess. Hold on, let me get it on. There we go, it's on. It's like it just clips in, so it just, as you put it. Oh, you can't make this up. Anyway, it does work, believe me, and it holds it on. It is absolutely awesome. I love it. I love it. It went on nice and easy. I took it off because I said, oh, I have to film this, and now I've just made a tit myself. But it works. Old water pump full of bloody sealer, just terrible. New water pump is on. Once it's on, always best just to give it a spin, just to make sure it's spinning and it doesn't feel notchy or doesn't feel bad or anything like that. What I'm going to do now is, I've also replaced this, I've showed you that. The new tension is on as well. I'm going to put the belt on, and like I said, I'm going to keep as much tension on this side as possible and keep the side where the tensioner is on is loose. And then I'm going to keep this pulley all the way to this side, and then hopefully the idea is once you tighten the belt, it is allowed to move, but obviously just into the middle. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and set the camera up on the bottom pulley as I'm doing the tension, but I don't know if I can. But even if I don't, once I've got it tensioned, I'll show you that it's in the middle. Right, look else what I found on the pump because of the sealer. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, look here. All rusty because it's holding water in behind there and just going all rusty. Now we're going to put the belt on. This particular belt has arrows, so you need to make sure you put the arrows on the right way, going with the direction of the engine. Just be aware, some belts do, some belts don't. This one happens to have it on, so we're going to do it this way. Right, what I've got is I've got a mirror set up. You can't really see it in the mirror, I can't get the angle. And I've got a light set up so I can see when I've got the tension right on the belt, and I'm going to set the camera up on the bottom, and hopefully it doesn't have to be directly in the middle. It just can't be touching one side like it was before. It can be slightly off, but it can't just be touching one side. How are we looking?
Oh, it still looks good. There's still a gap both sides.
Good stuff. I'll just tighten this up now. As long as it hasn't moved, we're good to go. You still okay?
Seems to be, yeah. There's still a gap both sides, I know, but it looks of things.
Perfect.
It's actually right in the middle, near enough.
Oh, even better.
If you want to have a look.
Right. Angle of the camera.
Oh, yes.
See how you can do it that way, look, and it looks like it's completely to one side.
Yeah.
Look at that, bang in the middle.
It's good. Good work.
Awesome. And you see down here, can you see, move the light out of the way, can you see, no you can't see. God, it's a fucking joke this. No room. Anyway, believe me, that mark is there, tensioned perfectly. One of the reasons you can have timing issues is because you got to remember, this is our pickup ring here, and this is the keyway. Now it makes a difference in how this is set. As you can see, it was off half a tooth. There's no damage been done to the engine, but it could set a light, a timing issue light, which you can never get off until you sort the timing out properly. And it can also do damage, or it might never even start. So, you know, that's why it's important to get that as close into the middle as possible, and this, you know, then is set in the right position. Also, what you want to do, this is kind of tricky, but you can kind of do it, is you want this pulley, see how much this pulley moves. Now, this is not going to cause any issues with timing, but you kind of want this pulley in the middle too. So I go all the way to one end, all the way to the other end, and I kind of feel that that's about in the middle. Then I screw my bolt in. I've spun the engine round twice to make sure it doesn't lock. I've obviously done that by hand. Our marks line up there. Well, actually our marks don't line up because it was off half a tooth. Our marks line up down there, so we're all good. I put the bottom pulley on. I'm going to put the fan belt back on now. And what I'm going to do then is put the start motor on, because I like to start this as soon as I possibly can to make sure there's no problems. I'm going to leave the cover off. I'm going to leave the jack supported underneath just so I can make sure it starts. No weird noises, nothing happening in here. So that's what I'm going to do. This is where your arse puckers, because you have to start it eventually. You've span it by hand, so you know it's not locking. Worst case scenario is, once you spin it by hand and there's nothing locking, is it just doesn't start. It shouldn't do any damage because you've spun it by hand, it's not locking up. So really, it's just maybe not starting. I pump this as much as I can. The engine mount isn't on. These are just kind of in place. I've just laid the airbox in there. Hopefully none of this gets caught anywhere. Make sure this doesn't get caught anywhere. And what we're going to do is we're just going to turn this over and start it and just see. I have to bleed the system as well, but just see if it starts. Is there any noise, you know, basically what the case might be. Pipes are off, so it might make a funny noise, but look, let's get to starting it. I think I'm going to have to, I have to get the key. I think I'm going to have to press the clutch down. It's not going to start without pressing the clutch, is it? Oh, it is. Oh, good stuff. Right. Oh, the bloody wipers are going off. Need to take these down. Stupid wiper. Should never leave anything on the windscreen. I've told you that. Listen to me, okay? That wasn't my fault. It was your fault. No, not you. Yeah, you. Actually, it should be not you, but you. You. Right. Let's go again. Sounds good. I'm just going to monitor this for a few minutes now just to make sure everything's okay. But first we also need to check no lights on the dash. There isn't. Good stuff. Right, what you want to do is, especially when you're putting any engine mounts on, especially going into alley, is you want to hand screw them all down first. Don't just screw one down and think you're going to be fine, and don't screw it down and lift the engine up at the same time, because it's going to do damage. Put all the bolts in, or the nuts, whatever you happen to have, or nuts and bolts, whatever it happens to be, put them all in loose, hand tight first. Then, because there's actually there's slots in here and the engine can move, and try and line them up to the original slots. You can see where they used to be and try and line everything up to the original place. So what I'm going to do now is I've more or less got everything back on. I've got some antifreeze now. I'm just going to bleed the system. We have a bleed nipple there, and we have a bleed nipple there. So I'm just going to put some more stuff in the system. Actually, I'm going to put that on first, so then I can bolt that up properly. So yeah, then I'll bleed it. This is ticking over quite happy. We've got all our clips in. I'm just waiting for it to fully bleed itself, even though I've opened up the two bleed nipples and squirting out water. So just waiting for it to heat up just to make sure she's A1 before I say job done.